Hello, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Witch Cafe, your safe place to talk about safe, safe place to talk about anything fringe, paranormal, mostly books. This semester, just kidding. This year, I'm expanding to different types of authors, more fantasy authors. Last year, I had 3 different fiction authors on, so we're kind of starting this season with Shawn Amick, the author of Cruelty of Magic, which is in the background, which you can't see, but the link's inside the description if you want to go check it out. So, Shawn, who are you? What's your bio? What do you do? Who are you? And what made you write this book?
So my name's Shawn Amick. Primarily, I consider myself an author. My first solo novel was The Cruelty of Magic, which released here on December 1st. Prior to that, I co-authored a novel back in 2020 that is detective noir fiction. Imagine Sherlock Holmes if he was really bad at his job and smoked a lot of weed. That's basically the first book I ever wrote. This last one is very dark poetic prose, high fantasy, very Tolkien-esque, with your complex magic systems and all that sort of stuff. And when I am not writing, I host the Between the Pages podcast for independent authors and authors seeking, traditional publication. It's basically a gateway for people to really learn how to be an author, what being an author is, how to improve your writing craft, and then we run, a Discord server for those authors as well.
And if you're an author, I highly recommend following them and being part of that community. That's made my writing journey so much easier. Because I had a community of other writers from different areas. Some are published, some are still writing, some are writing 3 at the same time and not publishing until later. And, some are, there's voice actors, voice narrators. There's all sorts of people in the community for you if you're a writer. So, Shawn, what is your book about and what inspired it?
So there are a few different point of views. So in essence, this is a very magical world, and magic has a very high cost attached to it. And there are a lot of people in the world, seemingly the majority, that want magic to go away. Now, the main character is a very strong female lead. She practices rune magic. She's the only person in this hidden city that is able to use magic seemingly without a cost that everybody else seems to incur. She's named in a prophecy. Everyone's unsure of whether or not they trust that prophecy, but it's telling her that she has to leave this hidden city, which is made worse by the fact that surrounding this hidden city is another point of view that you interact with, which is a warlord named Harigamoon, who his sole purpose is to destroy all things magic in the world, starting with this hidden city named Runefall that Kyra currently lives in. So he is surrounding this city, waiting to figure out where they are, and Kyra has to figure out a way to escape this entire army that is trying to destroy this city. There's 2 other points of view. One is a dwarf. His name is Grumpy. He's leading his people to the north, trying to find a place for them to carve out a living and survive, because their home was taken from them by a race that you'll interact with in the story. But the dwarven story becomes one of chasing your creator. It's not your typical dwarven story, and the dwarves don't function the way that they typically do in high fantasy. The last main point of view that you interact with is a father and son who are trapped in the sewers beneath a very corrupt city. And the father is a mad scientist type character who's scraping away trying to understand summoning magic. And he's tried and tried and tried to summon a golem, and it's not going his way. And you basically meet him in the middle of a freak out. And their story is understanding that magic is far different in the world than people perceive.
Very cool. And it gets right, like it's not one of those books that you start and you're just like waiting for something to happen. Like things pop off pretty quickly in the best way possible. So thank you for that. Because I was like, I don't read a lot of fantasy, so I didn't know what to expect. And I'm only about like 25% of the way through, to be honest. But I didn't know if I don't read fantasy. So, but I do like it and I want to read more and I need a physical copy to give to my husband because he's the fantasy guy. I should have just given it to him to like write me a review, write me some questions.
Yeah, yeah. The action starts off really soon. I mean, the title of chapter one is Lightning Strikes. I mean, you're put right into the middle of a very large conflict very fast.
Yeah, I had to read a few times. I'm just trying to visualize it. And your characters are very strong, like right away. Like I'm not bored. So that's always good. So
Thank
what
you.
made you write this? Like why this? You wrote the detective book first, and then you're like, this is a hard genre to write. It's
Y-
it's
Yeah, so
So how did you just say I'm just gonna write it? How did that happen? And your inspiration for writing it?
so this whole arm is Lord of the Rings. That's that's this whole tattoo sleeve. Uh, Tolkien, however you say it, I always say it wrong, is the most influential writer that has ever touched my life. I have read and reread and watched and rewatched all things Lord of the Rings more times than I have done any other activity in my life. It is by far the most important world to me. His voice is very distinct. It's something I've always loved, and I knew that I wanted to write fantasy. I knew that whenever, like, if I was to ever make it as an author, the thing that I wanted to be known for was my Lord of the Rings. Um, and I want to be clear, I didn't try to be Tolkien. I didn't take the long, slow prose where my story is meant to be a lens to show you language and a new world, where the creation itself is the thing to be appreciated, or the writing itself is the thing to be appreciated. I very much focused on active characters, active voice, making sure that a lot of exciting things are going on in the story to make sure that you're engaged. I would consider it action fantasy above most other things, to make sure that the Raiders stay engaged. So, because Tolkien was a high level of escapism for me as a child to kind of get away from things that I really didn't want to deal with, ever since I committed to the idea of being an author and knowing that that's what I wanted to do, my motivation has always been the same. I just want to give one kid the level of escape that Tolkien gave me.
Fair enough. And I think as book lovers, whether you're reading a UFO book, an occult book, or a fantasy book, I think we all get that when we're reading. It takes us to a place where we don't have to be in the everyday world, and that's one of the beautiful things about reading.
I
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
What? Okay, so you have a lot of magic systems. You have a world. I want to talk to you about some of like your inspiration for both. I'm a witch and I study a lot of different types of magic. So to me, automatically your rune stuff caught my attention. And how did you develop this magic system and how do you organize such a system, especially when you are, creating it from inspirations outside of yourself? I mean, it marries the stuff within yourself too, but how do you keep track of all that? What did you research and how do you organize it?
My research is probably something akin to simply appreciating classical literature. In the so with Kyra, who's the main female lead, who's doing the rune magic thing. Um, I knew that I wanted the most complex thing, the most complex magical system in this world. I knew I wanted it to require literacy. So being able to understand a language of its own was kind of important for me being able to create that initial magic system, and using written language for the sake of magic historically has been something that we've referred to as rune magic, typically related to like Norse mythology and stuff like that, but it goes back farther than that. So I knew that I wanted written language to be a part of the first system because this main hidden city um, is kind of hoarding all of that knowledge, and they're kind of positioning themselves as the intellectual elite of the world. There's good reason that the rest of the world kind of wants to tear this hidden city down. And with that being the focus, I knew that I wanted to have her need to understand some form of written language, which took me to runes. And then the one thing that I wanted to make sure was present was a difficult high level cost to all things magical in this world, which is what makes the main character, Kyra, so interesting because it seems like that she's unaffected by all of these costs, and everybody around her is like, what the heck? Like, why are you the only person that's capable of doing this? And she mocks the other people and just like calls them old men that don't know what they're doing, and all that sort of stuff. So that was the creation of the first one. I would say that there's probably a large amount of inspiration that came from things like Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's a whole elemental school of magic that exists. It works differently than it does in Avatar: The Last Airbender, but there's definitely lightning doing things that are controlled. There's water and fire and earth doing things that are being controlled. There's high levels of cost, and they work a little bit different than what you would expect from something like Avatar: The Last Airbender or any other use of elemental magic, but it's still there. Um, I knew I wanted that to be the brutish form of magic. I wanted the primal use of magic to be something that was purely physical. It was only meant to function as a club to beat you with. That was the whole intention of that form of magic. And then the other two main ones that you interact with in book one are summoning magic, and the reason that that one was in the book is because that's kind of what started the whole book to begin with. Was my cousin really enjoyed the first book that I wrote, thought it was hilarious. He knows that I'm a huge fantasy fan. He knows that eventually I planned on writing my own fantasy series, and he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and asking me to do so. And when I finally caved, he's like, I want it to be about summoning magic. No one writes about summoning magic anymore. I want a good summoning magic story. I'm like, okay. So back to the research question, there's this one older story that's really great in fantasy called The Djinn and the Golem, and it refers to like the old style of summoning magic, which was really cool. You create this basically like a sculpture of a golem, right? And it's not alive. And in order to bring it to life, you write on a tiny little scroll, and you place that scroll in the golem's mouth, and it's a binding contract between you and this summoned creature. And I always liked that. And I wanted to take some inspiration from that and change it and change how all that works. So there's a huge summoning magic story. In fact, summoning magic winds up playing a larger role than all the other forms of magic by the end of the novel. And then the last one is simply referred to as mysticism, which is spoken of as if it is a soft form of magic, but it's really just that the reader struggles to find a moment to truly understand what it is. And then whenever you finally get what it is to control that thing, you're like, oh shit. So usually a lot of different inspirations and making sure that it was something of my own creation, that I wasn't just taking something that had been done before.
So do you like to keep notes on stuff like that, or do you just have a really good memory?
Neither.
I
I don't take good notes. I don't have a good memory. There's often times that I kind of got to go back and read something. The novel is me keeping notes. There are often times where I may write a short story or something like that that never makes it into the novel. It's world building for me. It's so I know what these characters did, what their beliefs are, the way that they functioned in the world. It might have started with the intention of being a novel, and I just didn't make it so. There's quite a few short stories of Grunfy, the main dwarf, that'll probably never make it to any form of publication. They're for me.
That's interesting because that's kind of how one of my characters from my novel came around. Like I wrote about him in high school, and then I just was like, "You're going to be a main character now. Congratulations, you're a main character now." So I think a lot of authors do that, and even now I have like almost like journal entries for some of the characters. So like
Hmm.
if it's written in like a male main character, there'll be like a side journal entry for her like view of what just happened.
Yeah, Grunfy, the main dwarf, definitely started like 10 years ago when I wrote. No, How old am I? I'm 30. Shit. uh,
You're not allowed to complain about that now.
11 years ago, Grunfy was born. So, and it was poor writing in a writing course whenever I was in a writing workshop in college. I was tense shifting all over the place. It was bad. But that's when Grunfy was born.
So you just kind of had some of this stuff living in your head for a while. Did you kind of, you know, did you just kind of like daydream about it before you wrote it out, started writing, or did you just like sit down and just like start writing?
Yeah, so it kind of goes to a conversation that a lot of writers talk about that I never struggle with, which is writer's block. um, I think writer's block is simply a creative lacking discipline. Uh, I don't wait for inspiration, because I never have it. So if I waited for inspiration, I'd never write anything. So for me, writing has to be a discipline. So typically, like whenever I'm doing a bit more of the mundane task, going to the gym and lifting something heavy and putting it back down over and over again, I'm typically whenever my brain tends to wander, and I'll think of a character, like I'll think of a story that I want to tell. I always know the beginning, I always know the end. Those are the only two things I know. I pants the rest of it. And every time I've done that, I've always simply started with a story that never actually made it to the end of publication. It just never has gone that way for me. But I've always started and finished whatever it was, whether it was a short story or something entirely different, whether it was my introduction of Grunfy or whether it was a short story from Polyphemus and the Odyssey that never made it to publication, right? Like every single time I know the beginning, I know the end, I'm going to try to get there. And I usually create a character to tell the ending that I want to get to. So my initial want for Grunfy was I wanted to understand what it was to write romance. And I wanted someone who had a really what do they call that grumpy sunshine type? Is that what it is? Grumpy sunshine type character.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know
Yeah, where
like
they're
what the word for it is. We call them likable assholes in my life, but
yeah, where like they're gruff, they're a little rough
kind of
around the
sarcastic.
edges. But like the moment that they're with the person that they love, it's just, sunshine and rainbows and they're just
Oh,
completely
a
um
toasted marshmallow. They're like all burnt and black on the outside and soft and gooey on the inside.
there you go. There you go. That was my intention for Grumpy. And the first short story with them was him with his wife, and it was, as my writing tends to be, rather dark, but what focused on them was very loving. And that's basically the way that I've created all of my characters is I know there's something I want to tell. With the father and the son and the sewers, I knew I wanted a story about summoning magic, and I wanted the summoning magic to be about learning the wrong thing whenever you're young
Mm,
and learning how to grow beyond that. And I was like, okay, so I know I need a young protagonist and I need someone who's teaching them to do the thing wrong, father and son, right? So that's where those two characters are born. Um, I already talked about Kyra and then and Grunfy, and with my warlord character who becomes a main point of view, his was pretty simple too. I knew I wanted, if you're familiar with Tolkien and his writing of the Second Age of Middle Earth, there's one of the stories that's called the Fall of Gondor, and it's basically this hidden city is the last thing that stands between the big baddie of the world getting out to the rest of the world and kind of making everything horrible. I knew I wanted my Gondolin. I wanted my fall of a great city. I wanted the loss of the Library of Alexandria. I wanted it to hurt and be meaningful, and I needed someone that wanted to destroy something that meant that much to the world. And my favorite warlord in fiction slash history, depending on how you view it, is Agamemnon from the fall of Troy in the Aeneid and the Iliad and
mhm.
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, the warlord in my book his name now is Harigamoon, but in earlier drafts it was Agamemnar,
Very cool.
clearly inspired from Agamemnon. So I knew I wanted that warish, brooding character that kind of wanted to burn the world. So I always know the thing that the character needs to achieve before I know the character themselves.
That's fair enough. Do you do so you said you're a pantser when you write. What does that mean to somebody that might not know? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
What it means.
So being a pantser in the book talk world is someone that doesn't have an outline and that just writes. Now, I'm probably the most cheating pantser on book talk. Because the only reason that I don't consider myself a plotter is because I don't write it down. I know where I'm going the entire time, but my characters lead me there, and it's very much I'm never writing them to the destination that I want them to be. It's very much a process of when I switch chapters. 'Cause for me, switching chapters is switching point of view because I have a large cast. When I switch chapters, I'm switching the perspective. What I'm writing is rarely my own thoughts. It is what my mind has told me that this character is thinking that this character wants to do. And I'm just following them where they lead me. My opinion has and always will be I'm going to come up with the beginning, I'm going to come up with the end. If my characters can't lead me there, then it wasn't a good enough story.
Wow, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to think about it because some people really beat themselves up over it. Just blame your characters. You didn't do your job, guy. Like you couldn't get me there. Like
Yep.
so I like that. And a lot of writers talk about that too, is how their characters like they'll get done writing a scene, they'll be like, why did he do that? Like, why would you do that? You know? So,
Yep.
so yeah, the characters do take over, and I do like bullet points. Like I have like each chapter has bullet points, but I don't do the bullet points till I get to that chapter, and I know like the end. So I'm similar, but I
Outlining's
only do it.
not for me. It's not for me.
It's not for everybody, right? So a lot of people I know just pants. So what is your world called and describe it? So say you're telling people like about some distant world, which is your own. How would you explain it to them?
The name of the world is Nearhearth. The continent that you are on is Kaya, and it is a very primitive and magical world. Society is largely on the brink of falling, not because some apocalyptic event has happened, but because magic has played an integral role in the chaos of what it is to live in this world. And there are those who are seeking control of as much magic as they can. There are those who think magic is the problem. There are these things referred to as gods that you are trying to figure out what it means to be a god in this world, and how that kind of changes and what is divinity and all of those things. So it's very much a society is kind of standing at the cusp of making its worst or best decision, and you don't know which way things are going to go, but you know that it hinges on the choices people are going to make regarding magic.
That's very interesting. And that's so if something happens magically, it could change things for the better or worse.
Yeah, I mean, you find out in the first chapter that there's this event that they refer to as the end of an age, and it's spoken of as this very cataclysmic event, a resetting of history type event. And that our main characters that we're interacting with as the story starts are very terrified of the possibility of this happening, and that's basically where a lot of the initial conflict comes from because this our main character Kyra is named in this prophecy where she's told that she has to go somewhere and that she's going to have to somehow avoid the army of this warlord that's surrounding the city. But the reason that she has to go it isn't because like they're so religious and they're so pious that they think that we have to serve whatever this prophecy is. It's every time a prophecy isn't fulfilled, the end of an age happens. So it's like, do we let this girl walk into the fires of war, or do we risk the end of an age again?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm so curious. I don't want to ask too many questions because I want to read what happens. But yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts. I know you have other books planned for the series. Do you know when the series will end, or are you just going to keep going until it feels right?
I know book one's titled The Cruelty of Magic. Book two, which the first draft is done, and the editor is scheduled for April, I believe, um, is titled The Cruelty of Gods. Book three is The Cruelty of Devils, and book four is The Cruelty of Man. And I know that the story that is being told of the current cast and the cast that will evolve as this story continues over these next four books, I know that story will be finished at the end of The Cruelty of Man. I also know that there are at least four separate stories in the same world that I am fully intent on telling, and each one of them will likely spawn into their own trilogy.
Wow, that's going to be huge. You're going to be busy for a long time in a
I'm
good
gonna
way.
be in the world of Near Hearth for quite a while.
That's very cool. I like that. So I have my questions here. So you kind of answered most of my questions. I think the next few questions are like, what is your history of? So they're going to be a little bit more personal questions, but before I get to that, not like super personal, but kind of like your background. So I'm going to say hello to, I know George and Mindfork stopped by earlier, so they probably are not here right now, but Bob, Marley, and Sylvain, you guys, this is a fantasy interview of a book. So it's a little different than UFOs and spooky things. But I told Shawn to be spooky, and he's not doing a very good job. So I want to ask you, like, how did you? So you said you've been writing short stories for a while. Now, do you have any formal education when it comes to writing, or is it something you've just always been good at?
Neither.
Neither.
Um, so I started writing in grade school to impress the girl I had a crush on. So I would write these little short stories whenever I was in third, fourth, and fifth grade, and I would fold those little short stories up and I would hide them in her desk, and I would hope that she loved them, and she did. And she sat one desk in front and then one to the left of me every day, and she would turn around every couple days asking for the new story. For anyone curious, no, I did not get the girl.
Ah,
stories did not stories did not do their job. But it was my first time of consistently writing, and then I did it a little bit more whenever I went into middle school, and I kind of fell off whenever I went into high school. And as far as like formal education, like I'm from a very small blue collar town in West Virginia. Like there wasn't a whole lot on the education front. It was just your basic systematic form of general education that kind of failed me. Um, when I went to college, I switched between majors 6 times. The last time I finally landed on uh, English with a specialization in linguistics. And I only had like 3 writing classes that I was able to take over that whole program. So I didn't really study writing because it wasn't an option at the university that I went to, but I did study like English and linguistics,
Mm.
and that did have me read a good bit more of the classical stuff. But to be honest with you, I've read far more classics after college than I did during. So it was mostly just I am an ADHD hyper fixating MFer, and when I decided that I wanted to be a writer, which was a mental breakdown in college,
Mm.
um, I was like, okay, well then I need to understand how to do this, and I went back and I went to the classics of literature, and I understood what the ancient epic poems of Greece were before I started reading the grander scale, fantasy of the time, and then appreciating the older, you know, grandfather fantasy as Tolkien. Though I loved him like my entire life. I've always loved Tolkien. But then going back and appreciating someone like Frank Herbert and Dune, and going back and appreciating someone like Asimov and science fiction, and
Mhm.
then just other classics like Dostoevsky, and just learning the way that people have told stories that were successful at one time and how it's changed, and getting really involved in the world of someone like Brandon Sanderson, and what is it about new age fantasy that people are really looking for that they enjoy, and what's changed there. So it's all mostly self-taught because I didn't really have access to a program that was going to focus specifically on what I was looking for.
That's cool. A lot of people feel intimidated because they don't have the background in some of it, but I think that as long as you have like a story in your head, it's important to just start doing it. What is your advice to somebody that wants to write something, but they're kind of like afraid to?
You're not going to be afraid. You're not going to stop being afraid. Period. It's not going away. So don't let that be the reason you don't do it. Because if you do, you're never going to do it. Um, Usually, I would say focus on the thing that makes you afraid. Is the thing that makes you afraid the discipline that it's going to take to finish a book? Then work on discipline. Is the thing that makes you afraid that you're embarrassed for people to see your writing? Typically, that embarrassment comes from a lack of confidence in one's own work. Um, while I certainly still have imposter syndrome, there is a point where I am excited to show someone, a second, third, fourth draft, whatever it may be, because I'm going to look for alpha readers, beta readers, and that sort of thing. And I'm confident that when it goes to those beta readers, that when it goes to those editors, that I'm going to have excitement because I know I've done something good, because I've put the effort in to know that I'm good enough at the craft to produce something good. So I would say introspection as to why you're fearful is going to be the easiest way to get past it, because there is a reason. It's not general, just that you're scared of people seeing your work. It's a lack of confidence in something, and you got to figure out what that something is, and you have to address it. For me, the first book that I wrote will never be published. It was trash. Oh my gosh, it was so bad. And the writing was bad. There was tense shifting all over the place. I didn't know how to use a comma. Like, it was just bad. But I wrote it. It was whenever I was in college, and I made sure that I wrote 2,000 words every day because I needed to prove to myself that I had the discipline to write and finish a book. And it was about law enforcement. And I did a bunch of interviews, and I did all the work that a novelist should. I was just a poor writer. And I looked for workshops that I could get into. And even to this day, I earlier today I just finished a writing masterclass taught by James Patterson. Masterclass is a wonderful resource that has a ton of writers. For probably 2 years straight, I watched interview after interview after interview on YouTube of some of my favorite authors, and just listened to the way that they spoke and listened to the things that they recommended. Um, Brandon Sanderson's course, I forget which university he teaches at, but he teaches adjunct somewhere. And he has a whole course where he teaches science fiction and fantasy writing, and he goes over everything from world building and character creation all the way to what's it like trying to find an agent, and explaining what indie publishing is, and like all the way through. The whole thing's free. It's on YouTube. You can go look at the whole thing. He's done it twice. I did the first one and the updated one. Um, Finding the things that have driven other people's success and following them through has also been a huge help. Take Stephen King. Um, Stephen King wrote a biography called On Writing, and it's phenomenal. You're reading 40% of this book, and you're learning about Stephen King's background, and you're like, when are you going to get to the point of teaching me how to write? And then you realize that the whole story he's been teaching you how to do that. And there's a moment where it clicks, and you're like, you son of a, and it's great. And then you get to the end of that book, and Stephen King's like, by the way, one of the first things that ever improved me as an author is this book called on writing styles, something like that. I don't know. Read on writing, and you'll find the book. I forget what it's called, but it's basically different styles, and it's this one very bold author who, quite a while back, decided to tell everyone, this is how all of you should write forever for the rest of your life. It's like the most bold thing anyone's ever done, and the elements of style. That's what it's called. And when then you read it, and you're like, damn it, you're right. Like, how dare you be so audacious and correct? Now, there's a few things in there that I don't necessarily agree with, but elements of style was huge from a technical standpoint of just understanding how to write with a particular voice and how things get used and how a word can have a meaning, but the use of that word in sentence structure is going to mean something entirely different. Expand the way that you interact with authors beyond reading what they've wrote, and figure out the things that have inspired them, figure out the ways that they talk about the things that they love, figure out ways that they offer different classes, whether it's something free on YouTube or master class or something like that. Reading what others have written is a phenomenal starting point, but it's by no means the end.
Yeah, you do that too, though. You do a lot of that stuff with your Beyond the Pages, right?
I do.
So can we talk about your podcast now? Like, how did that come about? And it's not just a podcast, it's community. And the way I said that sounded really culty. It's not. Shawn,
I mean, they call it a cult of family, so it is what it is.
It's not a podcast, it's a community.
You're never going to hear me say those words, but if everybody else wants to, feel free. So the podcast is called Between the Pages. It's mostly just live on my TikTok channel, where I interview authors every day, 5 days a week, and then we have the Discord where there's just a ton of stuff. I have some wonderful mods who are very helpful in running that community because I'm useless whenever it comes to that. I'm just a pretty face where the Discord is concerned. So it's a lot of sharing of resources. It's the creation of critique circles where people can provide feedback for writing. More recently we've created Between the Pages awards for authors. That way indie authors can be award-winning authors too. Just submit, and we have a whole panel of judges who are going to go in and decide who's going to win these submissions. We have a bunch of different. We have a magazine on the Between the Pages website, which is betweenthepages.online, where members of the community come in and they offer their expertise. Say somebody is like excellent at character building, they're going to write an article on how to character build exceptionally well or world build exceptionally well, and that content's available on the website, and people are actively participating in that. It's really just writers trying to make writers better. In a meaningful and engaging way. And we try to keep people away from a lot of the individualism stuff as like politics and religion and whatever. Like, it's a writing space. Let's keep it there. And I think it's from what I'm told, it's helped a lot of people.
Really, like you have no idea, because I just wanted to write like a little smutty thing, and then I met all these other writers through the writing sprints and through the interviews that you were doing that are writing, like smutty stuff, but like it has a plot. So like I was like, okay, so I can develop this more, because I was developing and I'm like, who do you think you are trying to develop this? They're just supposed to be doing it, like it's just supposed to be hot vampires, hot girls, that's it. And then I was like, no, but then now I have a world in my head. And then just talking to people that have done it or are doing it alongside with you is so helpful. And also you get a lot of good book recommendations, and you get books like all the time, right? So because you do author interviews as well.
Every book behind me has been sent to me by an independent author, and I have 14 sitting on my pool table that are currently packaged that I have to open up and do their book mail videos for.
My goodness. I need to schedule with you guys, because you guys are all the way probably past April now. But
May, June-ish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I should probably make a sticky note for that. But I'm sure I had one at some point, but I wasn't sure if I was gonna like finish. So yeah. So, do you want to read like a blurb, like your book blurb, or like the back of your book, or something from your book
Sure.
to people to give them a little sample, a little
Well,
taste of Shawn?
yeah. So the blurb on the back. So the title is The Cruelty of Magic. Impending war and doubts of prophecy initiate a complex magical journey where some mean to destroy gods and magic, while others seek understanding. Kyra is named in a prophecy calling her to the Stained Temple, where no one else has ever gone. The prophecy is met with resistance and doubt while a warlord surrounds the hidden city harboring Kyra and her people. The warlord means to end all magic by destroying the city with his army made up of every known magic-wielding civilization on the continent. Meanwhile, a dwarf flees to the north to save his people while a father and son practicing summoning magic scrape by in a sewer. Impending doom, religious doubt, political intrigue, and tragedy haunt each step in this multiple point of view epic fantasy tale full of magical creatures, complex magic systems, and suspense.
So there you have it. That's if you're wondering what the book is about. I also put the blurb that you have on Amazon in the description with the link to the book, so you can go get it. Do people order through you as well? Do you have like a TikTok shop, or do you just do it through Amazon?
I do have a TikTok shop where you can order signed copies.
Oh, that was going to be one of my questions. How nice of you to answer one before I even ask.
There you go.
So, final kind of question is, do you have anything else coming up? Like, is there anything, are you going to be anywhere? Are you going to be doing any signings? Are you going to be, or doing any other podcasts? Did you, who's going to be on your podcast? Do you want to talk about that? Like, what's coming up for you?
Oh, the amount of people that are on my podcast is going to take way too much time.
Just
I'm
show up,
good.
guys.
I got 2 authors scheduled every day, 5 days a week. Like, stop by.
Yeah.
As far as what do I have coming up, before this, I did a podcast with Lorraine on the Author's Corner, I think, like literally right before I hopped on here. And then immediately after this, like actually right now, I'm hopping on another show called the Romanticy Corner or something. I forget. It'll be on TikTok Live. So anybody that's
Go follow Shawn
interested,
on TikTok.
I just show up. I just show up. Like that's how my Discord works. This is how my interviews work. I just show up.
Show up,
as,
look pretty. I like it. So look at Chris is here. Hi, Chris.
and as far as content, I have a spicy short story that I'm currently writing that is going to be it's going to be released probably in February, possibly March. That is in the universe of Cruelty. It follows one of the fan favorite dwarves in the first book. And the first draft of book 2 was completed about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that is slotted to be edited, I think, in April, which means that book 2 will likely release in May or June, though I have been approached by a literary agent recently who requested the full manuscript, so that we'll see where that goes.
No, that's exciting. If it works out, it's exciting. Or if you like them, it's exciting.
It's
You know,
exciting just to have the interest, so I'm happy with that.
you just want to get invited. You don't necessarily. So I'm like, I don't really want to go. I just want to get invited.
Right. Like, I want to stay at home, but an invitation's nice.
All right. Did we not cover anything that you wanted to cover?
No, I'm good. My TikTok handle is something. Shawn Amick author, I think, is what it is.
I think so.
I have Instagram that I'm not active on. I have a Twitter I'm not active on, and other stuff that I'm not active on. Basically, if you go to my TikTok, there's a link tree. All my stuff is there. If you're
I'm pretty
interested,
sure I
there's a
have
newsletter. There's all the social media. There's a link to the book. There's all the things.
I'm pretty sure the link tree is in this description. If it's not, I'll add it. But yeah, that's all I had for you. I didn't want to keep you for too long. I know it's late and you have a lot of things to do tonight. So thank you for coming on as my first like fantasy author. I had like a space fantasy kind of thing. And I had another like I've only had like space or alien themed fantasy authors on. So you're my first non. What?
I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me up.
Bob, you're so wild all the time. I love you. hang out after. Thank you to everybody listening now, later, another dimension. I'm not sure if I'm gonna keep these on YouTube for now, because I am like 2 seasons behind. But thank you for joining. Like, subscribe, follow. Is that what they say in this world? Anyways, have a good night.
Click all the buttons.
Testing.